I still don't know what made me pause on that account. We processed hundreds of flagged transactions a week, and most of them were nothing. This one just felt wrong before I could say why. I worked in the operations department at a regional branch off Tryon Street in Charlotte back in April of 2019. Ops isn't the pretty part of banking. We sat in a windowless back office behind the vault, 6 cubicles in a rough U-shape, fluorescent lights that hummed a note flat of any music you tried to play. My co-workers were Regina, who kept a jar of red vines on her desk, and Cal, who wore the same brown cardigan every day like it was a uniform. Our job was to review flagged patterns, escalate anything that smelled like fraud, and clear the queue before end of business. That Tuesday morning, the queue was fat. I was working through it with a lukewarm coffee, half listening to Cal complain about his commute, when I opened the file on an account belonging to a woman named Eleanor. She was 81. The account had a healthy 6-figure balance, no debt, no unusual deposits. What tripped the flag wasn't the amount, it was the shape of the withdrawals. Every 2 weeks, cash out. Always the same figure to the dollar. Never rounded up for a car repair, never a little extra for a birthday, never short by 100 because the wallet was already full. Just the same clean number over and over. And here's the part that made me sit up. The withdrawals rotated between 3 cities: our branch in Charlotte, a branch in Greensboro, a branch in Winston-Salem. In that order, every time, never out of sequence. The withdrawals were being made by a man named David under a power of attorney on file. I pulled the POA document. It looked fine at first glance. Signed, dated, filed in 2016. But when I zoomed in on the header, there was no notary stamp, just a witness signature I couldn't read. Our internal policy required a notarized POA for any account over a certain size. I don't know how this one got through, but it did, 3 years ago, under a manager who wasn't with the bank anymore. I sat there for a minute, then I pulled Eleanor's in-branch visit history. She hadn't walked into any of our branches in 3 years, not once. No signature card refresh, no ID update, no birthday cake from the tellers who used to know her. Before 2016, she came in almost every Friday. She'd bring her own pen. There were notes in the CRM from tellers who liked her. Then, nothing. I got up and went over to Regina's cubicle and told her what I was seeing. She chewed a red vine and squinted at my screen for a while. "Could be she's in a home," Regina said. "Could be she can't drive anymore. That's what the POA is for." "Then why cash?" I said. "Why rotate cities? Why the exact same amount?" Regina didn't answer. She just kept chewing. I went back to my desk and thought about it. My manager was in a meeting until 11. I could wait, or I could freeze the next scheduled withdrawal on a verification hold. The next one was due Thursday, in Greensboro. If I froze it and I was wrong, I'd get a talking to. If I didn't freeze it and I was right, whatever this was would just keep going. I put the hold on. I typed in the reason as a routine ID verification and requested that the account owner appear in person at a branch of her choosing to release funds. That was well within my authority. It was also, honestly, the smallest kind of intervention I could make. I told myself if the POA was legitimate, David would just bring Eleanor in, she'd show her license, and we'd all move on. Thursday morning, I was watching the internal system when the flag came back from Greensboro. Withdrawal attempted. Hold triggered. Client informed of the verification requirement. Client, per the note, became verbally aggressive and left the branch. An hour later, he called our line. The call got routed to me because I'd put the hold on. I remember Cal glancing over the top of his cubicle when I picked up. The man's voice was thin and fast. He said he was David, calling on behalf of Eleanor. He said this was harassment. He said she was elderly, she was frail, she couldn't be dragged into a branch just because some clerk had a bad morning. He didn't say clerk, he said something worse. I kept my voice flat. I said the hold was standard and could be resolved with a single in-person visit by the account owner, or with an updated notarized POA on file. He said, "She can't come in. She's not well." I said, "Then we can arrange for a bank representative to visit her at her residence with proper ID verification." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. I could hear a TV in his background, some daytime show with a laugh track. He said, "That won't be necessary. I'll bring her in tomorrow." Friday morning around 10, branch security called back to say a man had come in asking for whoever was handling the Eleanor account, alone, no elderly woman with him. He was loud, he had documents, he wanted the hold released now. I didn't go out to the floor. That wasn't my job, and I wasn't going to make it my job. I forwarded everything I had, the POA scan, the withdrawal pattern, the 3-city rotation, the branch visit history, the flagged call, to our internal fraud unit, and copied my manager. Then, I sat there and listened, because you could hear him from ops. If you cracked the door, he was yelling about his rights. He was yelling about elder abuse, which was almost funny. He was yelling that he was going to sue. Then I heard a second set of footsteps, calm ones, and the security officer asked him to step into a side room, and the yelling changed pitch and then stopped. He didn't come back out through the lobby. I don't know exactly how they walked him. I know an officer from Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD came by that afternoon and spoke to my manager for a long time. The rest of it I got in pieces over the following weeks. Eleanor was alive. She lived in a small ranch house in a suburb north of the city, in a bedroom that smelled, one of the officers told my manager, like it hadn't been aired out in months. She was thin. She was confused about the date. She recognized her own name and her late husband's name, and not much else that had happened in the last 3 years. She had signed something once, she said, because a nice young man from her church helped her with her mail. She thought it was for the water bill. She did not know that the man taking money from her account every 2 weeks was buying anything in particular. She did not know there were 3 cities. She had not asked to see a bank statement in a long time because the nice young man handled her mail. The POA on file was not signed by her. The signature was close, but it wasn't hers. The witness signature was his cousin. There had never been a notary because there had never been a notarization. I don't think about that account often, but I think about it sometimes when I'm clearing the queue and something feels a half degree off. Every branch I've worked at since, I've been the one people roll their eyes at for pulling threads. I'm fine with that. Eleanor sent a card to the branch a few months later in careful, shaky handwriting, thanking whoever it was who noticed. My manager put it up on the ops wall. It's probably still there. The camera on Decatur near the aquarium picked him up at 2:47 in the morning. I remember because I just finished my second bad coffee and was chewing the plastic stirrer flat. October in New Orleans is still warm at night. The streets don't empty out the way they do in other cities. You get the drunks stumbling home from Frenchmen, the sanitation crews, the occasional tourist who wandered too far from the quarter. But that Tuesday was quiet. The rain had come through around midnight and washed everyone inside. I was 3 years into the job. City contract, private company, doesn't matter. What matters is that from a small room on the 4th floor of a building on Poitras, I had access to about 400 cameras covering the downtown core, the quarter, parts of the Marigny, 2 monitors, 16 feds per screen, and a keyboard shortcut to pull any single feed to full. The guy on Decatur wasn't doing anything. That's what I want to be clear about. He was just walking, middle-aged, maybe 50, dark windbreaker, jeans, a cap pulled low. His hands were in his pockets. He walked at a normal pace, not fast, not slow, head slightly down. I noticed him because there was nobody else on that stretch of camera. When a single figure is moving through an empty frame, your eye goes to him. That's it. No other reason. I watched him for maybe 10 seconds and went back to my paperwork. We had an incident report from earlier that shift, a bag snatching near Jackson Square, and I was matching timestamps. When I looked up again, he was on the next camera. Toulouse and Chartres, same walk, same pace. That should have been fine. That's what people do on cameras. They walk through frames. But something in my head snagged on it, the way you sometimes notice a car has been behind you for 3 turns before you consciously register it. I pulled up the map view. Our camera coverage isn't perfect, but it's dense in the quarter, and I could see the little green dots of active feds laid over the street grid. I clicked back to Decatur, empty, clicked to Toulouse. He was already past it, on the corner of Royal. I switched to Royal. There he was. Same cap, same hands in pockets, walking. I sat back in my chair. I was tired, and my first thought was that he was just a guy going somewhere. Maybe a line cook heading home. Maybe an insomniac. New Orleans is full of people who move around at hours nobody else does. I decided to skip ahead. I picked a camera 4 blocks up his line and pulled it. Empty street. I waited, maybe 2 minutes. He walked into frame from the bottom of the screen and kept going. I jumped further. 6 blocks. Empty. I waited. He walked in. By this point, I had stopped pretending I was still doing paperwork. I was leaning forward, one hand on the mouse, the other pressed against my mouth. I could taste the plastic stirrer on my fingers. I tried to sell myself a story. Guy has a long walk home. Guy is drunk and walking in a straight line because that's easier. Guy is on the phone and not paying attention. All of those things happen. The problem was the straight line. He was moving north-northwest through the quarter. He never turned. He never crossed a street diagonally. He didn't pause at intersections to check traffic because there was no traffic. He walked like a man who had already decided where he was going and did not need to think about it. I ran the route forward in my head. Bourbon, then across Canal, into the CBD, then Common, then Poydras, then me. I laughed at myself. Out loud, in the empty room, the sound came out thin. I said something to the effect of, "Come on, that's stupid." But I skipped to the corner of Canal and Bourbon, and I waited. He walked into frame. I watched him cross Canal. There's a wide camera there, decent quality, and I got a better look at him for the first time. His face was in shadow under the cap, but I could see his jaw. He wasn't looking at anything, not up, not down, not around. He was just moving. I picked up the desk phone and put it back down. What was I going to say? A guy is walking. That's not a call. I switched to the camera at Common and Camp. Empty. I waited. He came in from the right side of the frame and walked out the left. Common runs into Poydras. My building is on Poydras. I stood up. I don't know why. There was nobody in the room to see me stand up. But I stood up and I put my hands on the top of my head like I was cooling off from a run, and I watched the monitor. I pulled the camera outside my own building. It's mounted on the corner of the parking garage across the street, angled at our front entrance. Good coverage, full color. The street was empty. I waited. I counted in my head. If he was going the pace he'd been going the whole way, he should be here in about 90 seconds. At around 70 seconds, he walked into frame. He walked up to the front door of my building. He didn't look up at the camera. He didn't hesitate. He reached for the door, and it opened. Because our maintenance guy had complained about that lock for a month, and nobody had come out to fix it. He walked inside. I lost him for a second, while I switched to the lobby camera. When it came up, he was already in the elevator, facing the doors, cap still on, hands still in his pockets. He hadn't pressed a button that I saw, but the doors were closing. I watched the little floor indicator on the elevator go up. 2, 3, 4. 4 is my floor. The doors opened on my floor. I could see the hallway camera. It's a short hallway. My door is at the end. Nobody stepped out of the elevator. I don't mean the man wasn't there. I mean nobody was there. The doors opened onto an empty car, and no one walked out into the hall, and the doors closed after a few seconds, and the elevator sat there. I couldn't move. I remember the taste of the coffee coming back up a little, that acid feeling. I picked up the phone and called building security. They have a booth on the ground floor, 2 guys usually. I told the one who answered, and I'm not going to try to remember exactly what I said because I know I wasn't clear, but he understood enough. He said they were coming up. I sat down. I looked at my door. Solid metal, key card on the outside, deadbolt on the inside that I had never once used. I turned the deadbolt. Then I sat and waited and watched the door. A knock. Not loud. 3 times. Spaced normally. I said, "Who is it?" And I hated how my voice sounded. "Security." I looked at the hallway camera on my monitor. 2 men in the blue polos they wore, both of them, standing at my door. I asked them, through the door, how they came up. The older one, a guy named Ray, said they'd taken the stairs. He said the elevator had been sitting on 4 when they came into the lobby, and they didn't want to wait for it. I let them in. We watched the footage together, all three of us, the man on Decatur, Toulouse, Royal, all the way up the quarter, across Canal, up Common, into our building. Ray kept saying, okay, okay, like he was working through it. The elevator car, empty. The hallway, empty. The stairwells, from basement to roof, empty. They walked the whole building with me, every floor, every closet, every bathroom, nothing, nobody. We pulled every exterior camera on our block for the next hour of footage. He never came out, not the front, not the side, not the loading dock. He was not on the R-off. He was not in the garage. Ray filed a report. I filed a report. The police came in the morning and took copies of the video and told us they would look into it. And I never heard anything back, and I never expected to. I still work the overnight. Same building, same desk, same coffee. I lock the deadbolt when I sit down now, every time, before I even turn the monitors on. Most people don't think about the ducts above their heads until something drips or a smell finds their desk. I'm the guy who thinks about them. HVAC service, commercial contracts, mostly hospitals and clinics around Atlanta. Steady work, nobody bothers you because you're crawling around in a ceiling. March 2022, I picked up a job at a psychiatric clinic off Clifton Road, private facility, 5 floors, brick from the 70s with an addition slapped on in the 90s. Standard PM inspection, coil cleaning, checking the VAV boxes. They gave me a set of blueprints at the front desk, a maintenance key card, and the usual speech about not opening any doors marked with red tape. The building manager was a guy named Ronnie. Big guy, always eating almonds out of a Ziploc. He walked me through the first floor and told me the shortcut up to the mechanical rooms so I wouldn't have to pass through the wards. I appreciated that. I've done work in psych facilities before, and it's not that the patients scare me, it's the staff. They look at you like you're about to leave a screwdriver somewhere and cause a lawsuit. The blueprints were dated 2015. I noticed but didn't say anything. Sometimes buildings update their drawings, sometimes they don't. I started on the top floor and worked down, which is how I usually do it. Clean systems on top, dirty stuff pulls downward. By the second day, I was in the crawl space above the 3rd floor, and I hit something on the trunk line coming out of the main AHU that didn't add up. According to the drawings, there should have been 4 branches feeding the east side. I was counting 6. 2 ran in a direction the blueprints didn't show at all, off to the north, into a wall I couldn't see past because of a fire break. Legacy thing, probably. Older buildings get retrofits, guys add lines and never update the drawings. Happens all the time. I made a note in my phone to ask Ronnie and moved on. Next morning I mentioned it. He was in the parking lot with his almonds. He shrugged and said the north side used to connect to the old wing, but that got sealed off years ago. Nothing to worry about. Returns are all closed. Air doesn't circulate through there anymore. So, the ducts still run into it? Ducts run everywhere in this building, man. Nobody's going to rip out sheet metal that isn't hurting anything. Fair enough. I went back up. Here's the thing. When you're servicing a system, you don't just look at what the drawings say. You put your hand on the trunk lines and you feel for airflow. Dead lines feel dead. No vibration, no cool wash against your palm through the seams. Live lines you can feel from 3 feet away if the volume is right. Both those extra branches were live. Not a lot, not like a supply run to an occupied space, but there was pull on them. Something on the far end was drawing air, slow, steady. When I put my ear near the seam of one, I could hear the low hum of movement inside the metal, like breath through a straw. I told myself the returns weren't fully closed, that a damper somewhere was letting through a trickle, and Ronnie either didn't know or didn't care. That was my working theory for the rest of the afternoon. Next day, I decided to trace the line, not because I was curious about the old wing, because if there was live air moving into a sealed part of the building, that's a mold problem waiting to happen, and mold in a psych facility is the kind of thing that ends up in a deposition. I wanted it on record that I flagged it. I followed the branch through the crawl space with a flashlight and a piece of chalk, marking runs as I went. It went further than I expected, past the firebreak, over what should have been an exterior wall according to my drawings, and into a section of the building that on paper simply did not exist. Insulation up there was old, the kind with paper backing they haven't sold in 20 years. The line terminated at a plate, not a damper, not a register, a steel plate bolted over the end of the duct with 6 hex bolts, sealed around the edges with butyl caulk gone hard and yellow. Somebody had capped this runoff deliberately. And still, when I held my hand near the plate, I could feel it, that soft pull. Air was going somewhere past it. I put my ear to the metal. At first, I thought it was the building. HVAC systems make all kinds of noise, and old ductwork especially. You get pops and ticks and the low whistle of a poorly balanced return. That's what I was hearing at first. Then I wasn't. It was voices. 2 of them, I think, maybe 3. Very quiet on the other side of the plate, and the metal was doing something to them, so I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like people talking in a normal tone in a room next door, not shouting, not distressed, just talking. I stayed there for probably a full minute. I kept expecting it to resolve into something I could explain, a radio left on, a TV, HVAC harmonics doing that thing where they mimic human speech. It didn't. There was a rhythm to it. Pauses. One voice would go quiet and another would pick up. Then a laugh, a short one, low. I sat back on my heels in the insulation and looked at my chalk marks going back the way I came. According to Ronnie, the old wing had been closed off in 2012. 10 years, no power up there, no heat. Anybody's guess whether the roof was even sound. I did not unbolt the plate. I want to be clear about that. There's a version of this story where I get out a wrench and open it up and find something. That's not what happened. I crawled back out, packed up, went downstairs, and found Ronnie in the break room. I told him about the voices. I told him about the pull on the line and the caped plate. He listened while he chewed, and when I was done, he wiped his hands on his jeans and told me that old buildings have weird acoustics, that sound travels through masonry in ways you wouldn't expect, that probably what I was hearing was staff on the other side of a shared wall bleeding through the metal. I said the sealed wing didn't share a wall with any occupied space on that floor, according to the drawings. He said the drawings weren't complete. I asked if I could see the original plans, the pre-2012 set. He said those weren't available to contractors. Not my department, not my problem. He'd get someone in-house to look at the duct, thanked me for the flag, wrote me a check for the week. I finished the job. I did not go back into that crawl space. That night in my apartment, I looked up the clinic. It took about 10 minutes on Google. There'd been an article in the AJC in late 2012, buried, 2 paragraphs. An incident involving multiple patients in the North Wing. Investigation pending. No follow-up article I could find. The wing was quietly decommissioned the following spring. I called a guy I know who used to work maintenance at another facility owned by the same parent company. I asked if he'd ever heard anything. He was quiet a while and then said he didn't want to talk about that place on the phone. He said if I still had the contract, I should hand it back. I finished out my obligations and did not renew with them the next quarter. I keep thinking about the pull on that line. Air moves because something on the other end is moving it. A fan, a leak to the outside, negative pressure from an open window, any of those. All of those are normal. I keep thinking also about the laugh.